What if the person you married was living a complete lie? Tonight, we explore how a dream honeymoon in paradise became a nightmare of betrayal and death. Imagine walking down the aisle, eyes locked with the person you believe will be your forever partner. The vows exchanged, promises made, a future together carefully planned. Now imagine discovering on your honeymoon that every kiss, every shared secret, every whispered, "I love you," was built on deception. This isn't fiction. This is the harrowing true story of Lila Marston and Adrian Carter, whose luxury honeymoon in the Maldives ended not with romantic memories, but with blood-stained floors and a bride in handcuffs. What drove a seemingly normal woman to commit such a violent act against the man she had just pledged her life to? The answer lies buried in a suitcase filled with photographs and letters never meant for a wife's eyes. How well do you truly know the person sharing your bed? The person who knows your deepest fears, your greatest hopes, who has access to your finances, your home, your heart? We often believe we know everything about our partners, but do we? Could you identify the signs if someone was hiding their true self from you? Studies show that over 60% of people admit to keeping significant secrets from their romantic partners. Secrets that could destroy relationships if revealed. Some people hide debt or past relationships, while others conceal entire identities, living double lives so convincingly that even those closest to them remain completely unaware. Would you notice the subtle changes in behavior? The unexplained absences? The defensive responses to innocent questions? Or would you, like many before you, dismiss your intuition and choose to believe the comfortable lie rather than confront a devastating truth? If this is your first time joining us on True Crime Dossier, take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Our channel delves into cases that aren't just shocking, they're educational. Each story we cover contains valuable lessons that might one day save you from becoming another tragic headline. And if you're already part of our community, thank you for coming back. Show your support by clicking that like button. It helps more people discover these crucial cautionary tales. Remember, understanding the darker side of human nature isn't morbid curiosity. It's essential education. Lila and Adrian's romance began like a fairy tale. She was a talented graphic designer with a passion for watercolor painting. He was a charismatic investment banker with a gift for making everyone feel special. They met at an art exhibit in Charleston, their eyes meeting across a crowded gallery, champagne flutes in hand. Within a year, they were exchanging vows in a lavish ceremony that left guests teary-eyed and envious. Friends described them as the perfect couple. They complemented each other beautifully, one wedding guest recalled. We all aspired to find what they seemed to have found in each other. But as Lila would discover on that fateful night in their overwater villa, the man she married wasn't just hiding aspects of himself, he was concealing an entirely different life. A discovery that would transform their luxury suite into a crime scene, their honeymoon photos into evidence, and their wedding album into a painful reminder of how blind love can be. In the next few minutes, you'll learn how a single discovery shattered everything Lila thought she knew about her husband, triggering a chain of events that would end with one person dead and another facing a decade behind bars. The Magnolia Gallery in downtown Charleston buzzed with energy that April evening. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the exposed brick walls lined with contemporary paintings. Lila Marston hadn't planned to attend the charity auction, but a last-minute invitation from a colleague changed the trajectory of her life forever. Dressed in a midnight blue cocktail dress that complemented her auburn hair, Lila circulated through the crowd, champagne in hand. She paused before an abstract canvas, tilting her head slightly as she contemplated the artist's technique. "The brushwork reminds me of Rothko," a deep voice commented beside her, though considerably more optimistic. Adrian Carter stood tall in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his confident smile revealing a slight dimple in his right cheek. With dark hair styled precisely and piercing blue eyes that seemed to focus entirely on her, he exuded the self-assured charisma of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "I was thinking the same thing," Lila replied, surprised by the immediate connection. "The color palette is brighter, more hopeful." Their conversation flowed effortlessly from art to travel, from books to childhood memories. 3 hours vanished in what felt like minutes. When the gallery began to empty, Adrian asked for her number with a directness that was both refreshing and flattering. "I'd regret it forever if I let you walk away without the chance to continue this conversation," he said, his gaze never wavering from hers. Their first date stretched from dinner at an upscale waterfront restaurant to a moonlit walk along the Battery, ending with sunrise coffee on Lila's apartment balcony. By the end of that first weekend, friends noticed a change in Lila. A glow, a certainty, an excitement about the future that hadn't been there before. With Adrian, everything felt heightened, Lila later told her sister. Colors seemed brighter, food tasted better, even ordinary moments felt meaningful when shared with him. Adrian pursued Lila with an intensity that was both flattering and consuming. Surprise deliveries arrived at her graphic design studio. Rare art books, hand-selected watercolor supplies, once even a vintage easel he'd discovered at an estate sale that matched her studio's aesthetic perfectly. Their relationship accelerated at breathtaking speed. Weekend getaways to coastal bed-and-breakfasts, introduction to families over holiday dinners, and the gradual merging of their lives. After just 4 months, Adrian presented Lila with a key to his downtown loft. By their 6-month anniversary, he proposed during a private sunset cruise on Charleston Harbor. The antique emerald-cut diamond had belonged to his grandmother, or so he claimed, and symbolized a family legacy he wanted to continue with Lila. "I've never been more certain of anything," Adrian declared as he slipped the ring onto her trembling finger. "You're the missing piece I've been searching for my entire life." Their wedding ceremony unfolded at Oak Ridge Plantation, a historic estate with ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss. 200 guests witnessed their exchange of vows beneath a floral arch of white roses and green hydrangeas. Lila's satin gown featured handmade lace that caught the golden late afternoon light, while Adrian waited at the altar looking every bit the devoted groom. "I promise to honor your truth and share mine completely," Adrian vowed, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. Words that would later haunt Lila during her darkest hours. The reception transformed the estate's grand ballroom into an elegant celebration with crystal candelabras, string quartets, and a 5-tier cake adorned with sugar flowers that mirrored Lila's bouquet. Guests commented that they'd never seen a more enchanted couple. The way they moved in perfect synchrony during their first dance, the genuine laughter they shared during toasts. When Adrian looked at Lila during their vows, "I remember thinking I'd never witnessed such devotion," recalled the maid of honor. It seemed like they were the only 2 people in the world. After the wedding whirlwind settled, the newlyweds boarded a first-class flight to their honeymoon destination, an exclusive resort in the Maldives where private overwater bungalows offered uninterrupted luxury and seclusion. Their villa featured glass floor panels revealing colorful fish swimming beneath, a private infinity pool overlooking turquoise waters, and a dedicated butler who arranged intimate dining experiences on secluded sandbars. "I can't believe this is our life now," Lila whispered on their first evening, watching the sunset paint the horizon in shades of crimson and gold. Adrian pulled her close, kissing her forehead with what appeared to be complete contentment. The initial days unfolded in a dreamlike sequence, couples massages in outdoor pavilions, snorkeling among vibrant coral reefs, champagne breakfasts delivered by boat to their private deck. They filled memory cards with photos documenting their perfect beginning. By the 4th day, almost imperceptible changes appeared in Adrian's behavior. A momentary hesitation before returning Lila's smile. The increased frequency with which he checked his phone, always angling the screen away from her view. His insistence on taking walks alone along the beach each evening to watch the sunset properly. Once, Lila woke at 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. When she discovered him on their villa's deck, he claimed insomnia and quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation toward their plans for the following day. "It's just jet lag," he assured her, though they'd been there nearly a week. "And honestly, work never stops completely. Some things can't wait, even for honeymoons." Lila pushed her concerns aside. After all, everyone acted differently when adjusting to married life, didn't they? The slight distance she sensed was likely her imagination, an unnecessary worry clouding their perfect getaway. How could she possibly know that in less than 48 hours, everything she believed about their marriage would collapse into irrevocable tragedy? The Maldivian resort exceeded every expectation. Their overwater villa featured handcrafted furniture, a private sundeck, and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the endless ocean. Each morning, Lila and Adrian awakened to the gentle rhythm of waves lapping against the stilts beneath their sanctuary. "I never want to leave," Lila murmured on their 3rd morning, watching tropical fish dart beneath their glass floor panel. Adrian pulled her close, kissing her deeply as morning light danced across their bodies. Their days took on a luxurious routine, breakfast delivered by their personal butler, followed by couples activities like scuba diving through vibrant coral gardens or afternoon cooking classes where they learned to prepare Maldivian delicacies. Each evening concluded with intimate dinners, feet in the sand at the beachfront restaurant or surrounded by candlelight on their private deck. Under brilliant stars, they shared plans for their future home, their careers, the children they hoped to have. "This is just the beginning," Adrian promised, raising his glass. "The first chapter of our perfect story." By the fourth day, almost imperceptible changes began to surface in Adrian's behavior. The attentive husband who couldn't bear to be separated from his bride now suggested independent exploration time each afternoon. "You should try the spa while I check out the fishing excursion," he offered with casual indifference that contrasted sharply with his previous insistence on experiencing everything together. His phone, once ignored during their romantic getaway, became a constant companion. Notifications prompted immediate attention, though he consistently turned the screen away from Lila's view. When she glanced toward his phone during dinner, he quickly flipped it face down. "Just work emergencies," he explained with a tight smile. "Nothing for you to worry about." Moments of disconnect multiplied. During a sunset cruise, while other honeymooning couples gazed adoringly at each other, Adrian stared absently at the horizon, physically present but mentally elsewhere. When Lila asked what he was thinking, his response came after a noticeable delay. "Just how lucky I am," he said, words that once felt genuine now sounding rehearsed. The most concerning changes occurred after dark. Lila woke on their fifth night to find Adrian's side of the bed empty. The digital clock displayed 2:17 a.m. From the partially open bathroom door, she detected the faint murmur of his voice. "I can't talk about this now," she heard him whisper urgently. "Yes, I know. It's complicated." When Adrian returned to bed, Lila pretended to be asleep. The next morning, when she casually mentioned hearing him up during the night, his explanation came too quickly. "Work crisis. The Tokyo market was crashing. Had to provide immediate guidance to our team." Similar scenarios repeated during subsequent nights. Once, she found him on their deck at 3 a.m., phone clutched to his ear, conversation ending abruptly when he noticed her presence. Another time, she discovered him hunched over his laptop, quickly closing it when she approached. "Just reviewing some investment projections," he claimed, though Lila noticed his flushed face and quickened breathing. "Go back to sleep, honey. No reason for both of us to be up." His explanations grew increasingly elaborate. Urgent client calls, overseas market fluctuations, work emergencies that somehow always occurred in the middle of the night. A steady stream of unease trickled through Lila's consciousness, yet she repeatedly dismissed her concerns. She'd never been a jealous person. She'd never needed to monitor a partner's behavior. Was she allowing honeymoon jitters to create problems that didn't exist? "You're being ridiculous," she scolded herself after spending an hour analyzing why Adrian had been so insistent on keeping his suitcase locked. "He's a private person. He always has been." She invented rational explanations for each troubling incident. His late-night phone calls? Legitimate work issues with international clients. His increasing irritability? Probably stress from being away from the office for so long. The password he'd newly added to his phone? Standard security protocol his company likely required. Even when she overheard him say, "I miss you too," during what he claimed was a business call, she convinced herself he was speaking to a colleague about work camaraderie, not something more intimate. Marriage requires trust, Lila's mother had advised before the wedding. Without it, you're building on sand. So Lila trusted, ignoring the mounting evidence that something fundamental was wrong. By their seventh day in paradise, the idyllic atmosphere had transformed into something fragile and strained. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly now contained awkward pauses. Shared laughter became less frequent, replaced by cautious observation. During dinner at the resort's premier restaurant, surrounded by honeymooning couples feeding each other dessert, Adrian's phone buzzed for the 11th time. When Lila finally asked directly who kept messaging him, his response was sharp. "Can't I have 5 minutes without an interrogation?" This trip was supposed to be relaxing. His outburst hung between them, shocking in its intensity. Adrian immediately apologized, blaming exhaustion and work pressure, but the damage was done. An invisible wall had formed, growing taller with each unexplained absence, each defensive response, each averted gaze. Later that night, as Adrian claimed he needed fresh air and disappeared for over an hour, Lila sat alone on their bed, tears streaming down her face, wondering how their perfect beginning had deteriorated so quickly. We've all been there, haven't we? That moment when something feels wrong, but we can't quite identify what it is. When our instincts scream warnings, but our hearts create excuses. Have you ever ignored red flags in a relationship? That unexplained absence. The defensive reaction to an innocent question. The password suddenly added to a previously open phone. We dismiss these warning signs because confronting them means facing uncomfortable truths. We create elaborate justifications because the alternative, that we've been deceived, is too painful to consider. Share your experiences in the comments below. Did you ever ignore warning signs that later proved significant? What would you tell someone who's noticing concerning patterns in their relationship? Your insight might help someone currently questioning their intuition. And if you're finding value in this true crime analysis, take a second to hit that like button and consider sharing this video with someone who might benefit from these critical life lessons. Now, let's return to Lila and Adrian's story as we approach the night that would forever alter both their lives. On their 8th night in the Maldives, Lila stirred from a deep sleep. Her hand instinctively reached across the king-sized bed, finding only cool sheets where Adrian should have been. The digital clock on the nightstand cast a harsh blue glow. 1:34 a.m. "Adrian?" she whispered into the darkness, her voice swallowed by the steady rhythm of waves beneath their villa. No response came, just the hollow echo of an empty room. Lila sat up, pushing aside the lightweight cotton sheet. The bedroom door stood ajar, a sliver of moonlight cutting across the polished teak floor. She slipped from bed, her bare feet silent against the cool wood as she moved toward the living area of their suite. "Adrian?" she called again, louder this time. The main room lay empty. No sign of her husband on the couch or at the writing desk. The private deck, visible through floor-to-ceiling glass doors, remained vacant as well. A half-finished glass of whiskey sat abandoned on the coffee table, ice long melted. Lila checked the bathroom, empty. The small kitchenette, vacant. The massage room, unoccupied. Their 2,000-square-foot villa, once a haven of romantic luxury, now felt cavernous and cold. She retrieved her phone, checking for messages. Nothing from Adrian. She typed a quick text. "Where are you?" and watched as the message was delivered but remained unread. Minutes stretched into a half hour as Lila paced the suite, creating increasingly elaborate explanations for his absence. Perhaps he'd gone for a midnight swim? But his swim trunks hung drying in the bathroom. A late-night snack at the 24-hour restaurant? But why not mention it or leave a note? With each passing minute, her concern deepened. This wasn't the first night he'd vanished, but never for this long, never so completely. Lila's gaze fell upon Adrian's leather suitcase, positioned in the corner of the room. Throughout their honeymoon, he'd been strangely protective of it, closing it whenever she entered the room, keeping it locked when they were out. "Everyone deserves privacy," she whispered to herself, recalling how forcefully she'd defended that principle throughout their relationship. Yet something was clearly wrong. The mounting inconsistencies in Adrian's behavior, the secretive phone calls, his increasing emotional distance, all pointed to a truth hidden just beyond her reach. Lila stood before the suitcase, fingers trembling. This moment represented a fundamental choice. Respect the boundaries of their marriage or pursue the truth, regardless of consequences. Breaking Adrian's trust by searching his belongings violated everything she believed about relationships. "This isn't me," she murmured, turning away. "I'm not this person." But 3 steps toward the bedroom, she froze. An image flashed in her mind. Adrian's panic the previous morning when she'd accidentally reached for his bag instead of her own. His reaction had been disproportionate, almost fearful. Lila returned to the suitcase, heart pounding against her ribs. If nothing was wrong, she'd close it immediately, never mentioning this momentary breach of trust. But if something was hidden inside, her fingers found the zipper, hesitated, then slowly pulled it open. The suitcase's contents appeared ordinary at first glance. Neatly folded clothing, toiletries, a travel guide. But as Lila methodically moved each item, she noticed a false bottom concealed beneath the lining. Her fingernails found the edge and lifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a manila envelope, fat with contents. Without allowing herself to reconsider, Lila emptied its contents onto the floor. Dozens of photographs spilled out alongside handwritten letters on expensive stationery. The first photograph showed Adrian, smiling broadly, his arm wrapped around another man against a backdrop of snow-covered mountains. Their matching ski jackets suggested coordination, intimacy. The next image, the same man feeding Adrian a bite of cake at what appeared to be a birthday celebration, their faces inches apart, eyes locked in unmistakable affection. Lila stood, rage propelling her upward. Arrangements? Is that what I am to you? An arrangement? A convenience? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She demanded, her voice rising despite his warning. Explain how marrying someone while loving another person isn't the ultimate betrayal. Adrian ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. You don't understand the pressure I face, from my family, from my colleagues. The expectations. So I'm your shield? Your socially acceptable cover story. Each realization hit Lila with physical force. Was anything real? Any moment between us? Adrian's expression hardened. I care about you, Lila. I chose you specifically because what? I was naive enough to believe your act? Because I trusted you completely. His silence confirmed her accusations more damning than any verbal response. All those nights you disappeared, you were calling him, weren't you? On our honeymoon. The pieces aligned with devastating clarity. He doesn't know you're married, does he? That's why you've been sneaking around. Adrian's face paled. This conversation is pointless. We should discuss this when you're calmer. Calmer. Lila laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. You think I'll ever be calm again after discovering my entire marriage is a fraud? Adrian's posture changed, shoulders squaring as he attempted to regain control of the situation. You need to understand my reality, he began, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality. My family would disown me if they knew the truth. My career at the firm would be over. He paced the room's perimeter, keeping distance between them. I do care for you, Lila. That wasn't false. You're important to me. You're exactly the kind of woman I should want. Talented, beautiful, supportive. Should want, Lila repeated, the words acid on her tongue. Marcus and I. Adrian paused, seemingly choosing his words carefully. We've been together since college. I tried ending it multiple times. I wanted my life with you to work. He moved toward her, hands extended in a pleading gesture. I convinced myself I could change, that marriage would redirect my feelings. That's why I pursued you so intently. I believed you could help me become who I needed to be. His expression softened, adopting the charismatic charm that had once captivated her. We can still make this work. Many marriages evolve into different arrangements over time. You and I have a connection that's valuable, real in its own way. Adrian reached for her hands. Think about it practically. We present a perfect image to the world. We can build a successful life together. Have children. Marcus understands the necessity of my public life. His voice dropped to a confidential whisper. Nothing has to change. You just know the truth now. We can move forward with complete honesty. Complete honesty? Lila withdrew her hands from his reach. You're still lying, to yourself most of all. Did you ever intend to tell me? Or was I supposed to live my entire life in ignorance while you divided your time between your wife and your lover? Something broke inside Lila as the full implications cascaded through her consciousness. Her breath came in shallow gasps, spots dancing at the edges of her vision. The room seemed to compress and expand with each heartbeat. Her wedding ring, once a symbol of eternal commitment, now felt like a branding iron searing her flesh. She twisted it off violently, her nail breaking in the process, blood smearing across her finger. Every intimate moment they'd shared replayed in her mind, now corrupted by the knowledge that Adrian had been comparing her to Marcus, perhaps even pretending she was someone else during their most vulnerable exchanges. The humiliation burned through her veins like acid. The future she'd planned, their home together, children with Adrian's blue eyes, growing old side by side, disintegrated, leaving nothing but ashes where her dreams had been. Who else knows? She demanded, her voice unnaturally calm. Your parents. Our friends. Am I the only fool who didn't see through your performance? When Adrian didn't immediately answer, hysterical laughter bubbled from her throat. Everyone knows, don't they? They've all been pitying me behind my back. Poor, oblivious Lila, too blinded by love to see the obvious truth. The room tilted sideways as her identity collapsed. Who was she if not Adrian's loving wife? What remained when the foundation of her life was revealed as fiction? Adrian moved toward the scattered evidence, attempting to gather the photographs and letters. This conversation is over. We'll discuss options tomorrow when you've had time to process. Don't touch them. Lila lunged forward, blocking his access to the documents. You don't get to hide the evidence of your betrayal. Adrian grabbed her wrist, his grip firm. "You're becoming hysterical. You need to calm down." Lila wrenched free, stumbling backward. "Don't tell me how to feel. You've destroyed everything." The physical contact breached a final boundary. Adrian reached again for the letters, and Lila shoved him with unexpected force. He staggered back, colliding with the writing desk. "Keep your hands off me," she hissed, retreating toward the bedroom doorway. Adrian advanced, his patience visibly thinning. "This tantrum won't change anything. The sooner you accept reality, the better for both of us." When he tried to pass her to enter the bedroom, Lila blocked his path. He pushed forward, she resisted. Their bodies collided, balance lost in the struggle. Adrian's hand closed around her upper arm, fingers digging painfully into her flesh. As they grappled in the doorway, Lila's back struck the bedside table. Her hand instinctively reached out to steady herself, fingers closing around the base of a heavy brass lamp, an antique piece selected by the resort designers for its authentic Maldivian craftsmanship. Adrian's face transformed with anger, his mask of control finally slipping. "Enough," he shouted, his grip tightening further. "You will listen to me." Fear flashed through Lila's mind, not recognition of who Adrian had been all along, but terror at who he was becoming in this moment. His familiar features contorted into those of a stranger, someone capable of causing harm. Without conscious decision, operating purely on instinct, Lila swung the lamp upward. The heavy brass base connected with Adrian's temple with a sickening thud. His grip on her arm instantly released. Time slowed as Adrian's expression shifted from rage to confusion. A thin line of crimson appeared at his hairline, widening into a stream that traced the contour of his cheekbone. He stumbled backward, one hand reaching toward the wound, the other extended toward Lila. "Lila," he whispered, before crumpling to the floor in a heap of expensive linen pajamas. The lamp slipped from Lila's fingers, hitting the teak floor with a dull thud that echoed through the suddenly silent villa. She stood motionless, watching dark blood pool beneath Adrian's head, spreading across the polished wood in an ever-widening circle. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice unrecognizable. When he didn't respond, she dropped to her knees beside him. "Adrian, get up." Her trembling fingers sought a pulse at his neck, finding nothing. She pressed harder, desperately searching for any sign of life. Blood seeped into the fabric of her nightgown as she leaned over him, her tears falling onto his still face. The magnitude of what had occurred descended upon her with crushing weight. One moment had transformed her from betrayed wife to killer. One swing had ended a life and forever altered her own. Lila's body began to shake uncontrollably as shock set in. The villa's phone sat just inches from Adrian's outstretched hand, a lifeline to help, to authorities, to the irrevocable consequences of what she'd done. With blood-stained fingers, she reached for it, knowing that with one call, the fairy tale would truly end, not with happily ever after, but with sirens, handcuffs, and a future defined by a single, irreversible moment of violence. The call reached resort security at 3:42 a.m. The night manager, alerted by a neighboring guest who reported shouting followed by a heavy thud, dispatched 2 officers to investigate. What they discovered upon entering Villa 217 would haunt them for years to come. "We knocked repeatedly," security officer Mahmoud Nazim later testified. "When we received no response but heard crying inside, protocol required us to enter using the master keycard." The security team found Lila kneeling beside Adrian's body, her white nightgown saturated with blood, her eyes vacant and unfocused. The brass lamp lay nearby, its base coated with blood and hair. Photographs and letters remained scattered across the floor, telling a story the officers couldn't yet comprehend. "Don't touch him," Lila whispered when they approached. "He's pretending. He's always pretending." Local police arrived 20 minutes later, their boat's emergency lights cutting through pre-dawn darkness. Detective Saeed Ibrahim, head of the island's criminal investigation unit, took immediate control of the scene. "Preserve everything," he instructed his team. "Every item in this room might explain why a bride killed her groom." Crime scene technicians photographed the villa meticulously, bloodstained patterns on the teak floor, the positioning of Adrian's body, the scattered evidence of his secret life. Medical examiner Dr. Farah Nassim confirmed death at the scene, noting the severe blunt force trauma to Adrian's right temple. "A single blow," she observed, "but delivered with significant force." As dawn broke over the Indian Ocean, Lila remained sitting on the deck, handcuffed and silent, watching paradise transform into the first day of her new reality as a killer. Police transported Lila to the main island at 7:15 a.m., a journey made surreal by the juxtaposition of her bloodstained nightgown against the postcard-perfect turquoise waters. Resort staff hastily erected privacy screens to shield her from the smartphones of curious guests already documenting the scene for social media. At police headquarters, Detective Ibrahim conducted the initial interview. Lila recounted the events mechanically, emotion drained from her voice. She made no attempt to deny her actions. "I found his secrets," she stated flatly. "He tried to explain why marrying me while loving someone else was acceptable. When he grabbed me, I reacted." Within hours, news of the homicide reached international media. The elements proved irresistible to journalists: a luxury honeymoon resort, a beautiful newlywed couple, a bloody murder scene, and the explosive revelation of a double life. Reporters descended upon the Maldives like locusts, booking every available flight. Back in Charleston, Lila's parents collapsed when police arrived at their door with news of their daughter's arrest. Adrian's family released a brief statement expressing shock and requesting privacy, unaware that their son's carefully constructed facade was about to crumble publicly. "American Bride Kills Husband on Honeymoon" screamed the first headlines, accompanied by wedding photos harvested from social media. Cable news networks dispatched correspondents to the Maldives and Charleston simultaneously, splitting screens between paradise and hometown reactions. By evening, #HoneymoonMurder trended globally. Armchair detectives dissected every available detail, while internet sleuths excavated the couple's digital footprint, searching for warning signs everyone had missed. The honeymoon murder label first appeared on the chirrun of a morning news program, coined by an anchor seeking a catchy shorthand. Within days, the phrase became ubiquitous, appearing in headlines worldwide and instantly recognizable to millions. Media coverage followed predictable patterns. Initial reports portrayed Lila as a cold-blooded killer who had lured a successful man into marriage only to murder him. Publications featured photos of her looking unkempt in custody alongside Adrian's polished corporate headshots, visually reinforcing a narrative of calculated violence. The story dominated news cycles for its symbolic potency, the ultimate betrayal occurring during what should have been the happiest period of a couple's life. Psychologists offered analysis on television, speculating about Lila's mental state and potential premeditation. "The honeymoon represents a sacred beginning," noted Dr. Eleanor Wright on a primetime special. "Violence during this period strikes at our collective belief in love itself. That's why these cases fascinate us. They represent the destruction of hope." True crime podcasters launched emergency episodes, reconstructing the timeline with limited information. Documentarians contacted witnesses, offering payment for exclusive interviews. Entertainment studios began negotiations for film rights before Adrian's body left the Maldives. The media's fixation intensified when Lila's lawyer announced she would claim self-defense motivated by emotional distress, a strategy that seemed implausible until details of Adrian's deception began to leak. "This case isn't about a wife killing her husband," attorney James Mercer stated to reporters. "It's about a woman defending herself against the ultimate psychological assault, the complete fabrication of a marriage." The forensic investigation confirmed key elements of Lila's account. Blood spatter analysis indicated she had struck Adrian from a defensive position while backed against the wall. The medical examiner's report noted bruising on Lila's upper arms consistent with her claim that Adrian had grabbed her forcefully. The physical evidence suggests an unplanned violent response, forensic analyst Nadia Khoury explained. The position of the victim, the angle of impact, and the single blow all support a spontaneous rather than premeditated act. Resort staff provided statements corroborating the couple's deteriorating relationship during their stay. A waiter recalled heated whispers at dinner. A massage therapist mentioned Lila's tearful cancellation of a couple's treatment. The villa's butler reported Adrian receiving late-night food deliveries when Lila was allegedly sleeping. Most damning was Adrian's phone, unlocked by investigators using his fingerprint before the body cooled. The device contained hundreds of messages between Adrian and Marcus, including exchanges timestamped during the honeymoon itself. "Miss you more than you know," Adrian had written at 2:13 a.m., minutes before his death. "This charade is nearly over. 2 more days and I can explain everything to her." Marcus's reply came seconds later. "I hate sharing you, even temporarily. Come home to me." These digital breadcrumbs revealed not just infidelity, but an elaborate scheme. Adrian had planned to end the marriage upon returning home, having secured his family's inheritance that required him to be suitably married by age 30. The discovery of Marcus Reynolds, Adrian's longtime partner, shifted public perception dramatically. A finance executive at a competing firm, Marcus initially denied connection to Adrian beyond professional acquaintance. This pretense collapsed when police presented him with the letters and photographs discovered in the villa. Media outlets published the least explicit of these images. Adrian and Marcus embracing beneath the northern lights, sharing champagne on a private yacht, wearing matching watches inscribed with their initials. These photographs, juxtaposed against Adrian and Lila's wedding pictures, told the story of calculated deception more powerfully than any testimony. Marcus eventually confirmed their 4-year relationship through his attorney, claiming he'd been pressured by Adrian to remain temporarily secret until financial matters were resolved. He expressed shock at discovering Adrian had actually married, believing the wedding was merely for appearance. Friends from Adrian's past came forward, revealing knowledge of his relationship with Marcus and their surprise when he suddenly announced his engagement to Lila. Some admitted attending the wedding despite knowing it was, in their view, fraudulent, a revelation that intensified public sympathy for Lila and raised profound questions about collective responsibility in maintaining such significant deceptions. 6 months after the fatal night in the Maldives, the trial of Lila Marston began in a crowded Charleston courtroom. The international media attention necessitated increased security, with officers stationed throughout the building and strict screening procedures for attendees. Lila entered each day flanked by her defense team, her once vibrant appearance now subdued. Her parents sat directly behind her, their expressions reflecting a mixture of support and devastation. Across the aisle, Adrian's family maintained rigid composure, avoiding eye contact with the woman they considered their son's murderer. Judge Eleanor Harmon established strict guidelines for the proceedings, prohibiting cameras in the courtroom and limiting press access. Decisions that only intensified public fascination with the case. The prosecution opened with a dramatic display of the bloodied lamp, emphasizing the violence of Adrian's death. This was not self-defense, Prosecutor Thomas Reynolds declared. This was an act of rage by a woman who discovered her husband's infidelity and chose the most permanent solution. The defense countered with the hidden photographs and letters, distributing copies to the jury. This case isn't about infidelity, Attorney Catherine Walsh responded. It's about calculated deception on a scale that would destroy anyone's psychological stability. Throughout 12 days of testimony, the courtroom atmosphere fluctuated between tense silence and emotional outbursts. When the prosecution displayed crime scene photos, Adrian's mother collapsed and required medical attention, forcing a day's recess. Most compelling was Lila's own testimony on day 7. For 4 hours, she recounted her relationship with Adrian, from their first meeting through the devastating discovery on their honeymoon. Her description of the confrontation, delivered in a voice barely above a whisper, left several jurors visibly moved. "I never intended to hurt him," she testified. "I just wanted him to stop, to give me space to breathe, to process what my life had become." The prosecution's case rested on 3 main arguments: premeditation, excessive force, and alternative options. Mrs. Marston had hours between discovering the letters and confronting her husband, Reynolds argued. She chose violence when she could have chosen separation, confrontation in a public place, or immediate departure from the island. The defense constructed their narrative around 3 counterpoints: psychological trauma, reasonable fear, and temporary diminished capacity. Adrian Carter's multi-year deception wasn't merely a betrayal, but a form of psychological assault, Walsh contended. When he became physically threatening during their confrontation, Mrs. Marston's fight-or-flight response activated in a context of severe emotional distress. The legal team's approaches reflected broader societal questions. Was Lila a victim pushed beyond endurance by elaborate deception, or had she exercised the ultimate control over a situation she could have handled differently? Marcus Donovan's testimony proved pivotal. Appearing via video link, he confirmed his 4-year relationship with Adrian, including their plans to reunite after the honeymoon. "Adrian told me the marriage was temporary," Marcus stated. He needed to satisfy inheritance requirements from his grandfather's will, which specified he must be married by 30. He claimed Lila understood this arrangement. 3 of Adrian's college friends testified to knowing about his relationship with Marcus, expressing shock when Adrian announced his engagement to Lila. We assumed she knew about Marcus, former roommate Jason Lee testified. Adrian told us it was a mutually beneficial arrangement. She got social status and financial security. He got his inheritance and family approval. The resort staff provided compelling context. The night manager testified about Adrian's frequent late-night absences from their villa, while a server recalled overhearing Adrian on a call saying, "I miss you too, just 2 more days of this." Dr. Rebecca Thornfield, a forensic psychologist with expertise in trauma response, provided critical analysis of Lila's mental state during and after the incident. Mrs. Marston experienced what we call identity disruption trauma, a profound psychological injury that occurs when fundamental beliefs about one's life are suddenly proven false, Dr. Thornfield explained. Her entire identity as a beloved wife was instantly invalidated. The expert detailed how such trauma can trigger neurological responses identical to physical threats. The brain doesn't distinguish between physical and extreme emotional danger. Both activate the same survival mechanisms. Dr. Thornfield's analysis of Lila's post-incident behavior, her dissociative state, fragmented memory, and emotional numbness, aligned with classic trauma patterns. These aren't signs of calculated violence, but of severe psychological injury. Her actions weren't premeditated but instinctive, a defensive response to perceived threat during acute emotional distress. After 15 days of testimony, the jury received their instructions and began deliberations. They requested several items during their 22 hours of discussion. The medical examiner's report, photographs of Lila's bruised arms, and transcripts of Marcus Donovan's testimony. On the 3rd day, they reached their verdict. As the courtroom fell silent, the jury forewoman rose to deliver their decision. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant not guilty. A collective gasp swept through the gallery. On the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant not guilty. Adrian's mother sobbed quietly. On the charge of voluntary manslaughter, we find the defendant guilty. The mixed verdict reflected the jury's conclusion that while Lila had acted unlawfully, her actions resulted from extreme emotional disturbance, rather than malice or premeditation. Through interviews later, jurors revealed they had been split between full acquittal and manslaughter, ultimately compromising after recognizing the complex circumstances. 2 weeks later, Lila returned for sentencing. Judge Harmon's courtroom fell silent as she prepared to determine Lila's fate. This court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances of this case. Judge Harmon began. Mrs. Marston, you were subjected to profound deception that would test anyone's emotional stability. However, a life was taken, and our justice system requires accountability for such actions regardless of provocation. The judge cited mitigating factors: Lila's lack of criminal history, the psychological trauma she endured, and evidence of Adrian's deception, before announcing her decision. I hereby sentence you to 10 years imprisonment with eligibility for parole after serving 4 years. The sentence represented a significant reduction from the maximum 20-year penalty for voluntary manslaughter. As officers led Lila away, she glanced back at her parents with a resigned nod. Her expression conveyed not protest but acceptance. The final chapter in a tragedy that began with deception and ended with irreversible consequences. 3 years into her 10-year sentence at the Camille Griffin Graham Correctional Institution, Lila Marston's daily routine had taken on a mechanical rhythm. She rose at 5:30 a.m. for count, worked mornings in the prison library cataloging books, and spent afternoons participating in group therapy sessions. Fellow inmates initially viewed her with curiosity. The honeymoon killer arrived with notorious status, but as months passed, she became simply another woman struggling to reconcile her past with an altered future. The hardest part isn't confinement, Lila revealed during her first interview since incarceration. It's knowing that regardless of circumstances, I took a life. Nothing can change that reality. Her cell contained few personal items: family photos, writing journals, and a small collection of novels supplied by her mother during monthly visits. Prison officials noted her exemplary behavior, describing her as quiet, cooperative, and introspective. She declined most interview requests, focusing instead on correspondence courses in psychology, a field she hoped might help her understand the complex factors that led to her tragic actions. Nights proved most challenging, when silence allowed memories to surface. I replay that evening constantly, she confided to her therapist. Not just the moment with the lamp, but all the warning signs I ignored, all the questions I should have asked earlier. Though eligible for parole consideration after 4 years, Lila expressed ambivalence about early release. Freedom means facing a world that knows me only through headlines, and facing myself without the structure that has, ironically, helped me process what happened. Sometimes I wonder if I deserve another chance when Adrian will never get one. The Honeymoon murder case transcended typical true crime fascination, sparking broader discussions about marriage, deception, and the pressures that drive people to create false lives. Legal experts cited the case in debates about expanding the definition of emotional self-defense in criminal proceedings, while relationship therapists reported clients specifically referencing Lila and Adrian when discussing trust concerns. Social media platforms hosted vigorous debates about moral responsibility. Not just Adrian's for his deception or Lila's for her violent response, but also the ethical obligations of friends who remained silent despite knowing about Adrian's double life. The hashtag would you tell trended as people questioned their own boundaries around revealing others' secrets. LGBTQ+ advocacy groups highlighted how societal and family pressures contributed to Adrian's perceived need for deception. When families make acceptance conditional on conforming to expectations, they create impossible situations, noted one spokesperson. This tragedy illustrates the human cost of forcing people to choose between authenticity and acceptance. The case entered academic discourse in psychology, law, and ethics classrooms, where professors used it to challenge students' assumptions about privacy, truth, and justifiable responses to betrayal. This wasn't simply about infidelity, explained Dr. Margaret Chin, ethics professor at Columbia University. It forces us to examine how we value honesty in our most intimate relationships and what happens when foundational trust is completely violated. The destruction extended far beyond the villa in the Maldives. Adrian's parents, confronted with their son's hidden reality, retreated from public life to process their dual grief, mourning both their son's death and the realization that they never truly knew him. Their public statements evolved from defending Adrian's character to acknowledging their role in creating an environment where he felt unable to live authentically. Marcus Donovan relocated abroad after receiving death threats from those who blamed him for participating in the deception. "I loved someone who couldn't fully love me back because of external pressures," he wrote in a rare statement. "Now I'm paying for choices we both made from places of fear rather than courage." The ripple effects touched dozens more. Adrian's colleagues questioned every interaction they'd had with him, wondering what else he had concealed. Wedding guests revisited the ceremony, reinterpreting vows they'd witnessed with uncomfortable new context. Lila's parents sold their Charleston home, unable to face community whispers and constant media attention. The case illuminated the devastating physics of lies, how deceptions require increasing energy to maintain, creating ever-widening circles of collateral damage. Adrian's fabricated life required constant maintenance, with each new lie necessitating more elaborate cover stories. Friends who suspected the truth but remained silent became unwitting accomplices, their silence interpreted as approval. The tragedy wasn't just that Adrian died or that Lila's life was destroyed, observed psychiatrist Dr. James Wilson. It's that an entire community of people participated, through action or inaction, in maintaining a fiction that was destined to collapse with catastrophic consequences. This heartbreaking story offers critical lessons for all of us navigating relationships in an age where appearances often mask reality. First, trust your intuition. Lila noticed concerning patterns in Adrian's behavior, but repeatedly dismissed her own observations. When someone's words consistently contradict their actions, believe the actions. Second, secrets of significant magnitude corrode relationships from within. While privacy has its place, deception about fundamental aspects of identity creates emotional time bombs with devastating potential. Third, understand that confronting difficult truths, while painful, rarely produces consequences as severe as allowing deceptions to continue unchecked. Had Lila addressed her concerns earlier, or had Adrian's friends encouraged honesty, the tragic outcome might have been avoided. Finally, recognize that societal pressures pushing people to hide their authentic selves exact a terrible psychological toll. Creating environments where truth is valued over conformity protects everyone involved. These aren't merely academic observations, but potential life-saving insights that might prevent similar tragedies. If this case has affected you or made you reconsider aspects of trust in your own relationships, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Lila's position when discovering such profound deception? Would you have noticed the warning signs earlier? Hit that subscribe button now to ensure you don't miss our upcoming investigations into cases that contain crucial life lessons. By sharing this video with friends and family, you're not just passing along an interesting story, but potentially giving them tools to recognize warning signs in their own relationships. Remember, True Crime Dossier isn't just about examining the darkest moments of human behavior. It's about extracting wisdom that might prevent future tragedies. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these important stories to light.